get started this evening, not morning, Jesus, this evening. Are we going to read how we're going to proceed this evening with this one item that we have on our agenda this evening? So this is the regularly scheduled meeting of the January 11th meeting of the Geneva Planning and Zoning Commission. I am Scott Stocking, Chairman of the Commission. Tonight, for those benefit and those in the audience, I'm joined by, there is only two in the audience, but just to introduce ourselves. Got Rebecca Holman, Mike Slifka, Tim Moran, John Mead, Community Developer David DeGroot, City Planner Mike Busing, and Assistant Planner Jesse Muncy. The Planning and Zoning Commission meetings air live on Geneva Broadcast Network, which can be viewed on Comcast Channel 10 and AATUverse Channel 1999, MetroNet Channel 93, and City's YouTube channel. This evening, the Commission will host a concept review for Agenda 5A. As a friendly reminder, the Agenda 5A does not require a public hearing. However, members of the public wishing to make comments or ask questions regarding this item may do so during the public comment portion of the meeting at agenda on item 6. In order to help the quality of the meeting broadcast, I reminded all commissioners to mute themselves except when addressing the commission. Commissioners are also encouraged to state their names prior to speaking and prior to providing a roll call vote to better assist our record keepers. For example, Stocking, yea, nay, or abstain. Okay? One item, simple. We're going to go through it. Anna, will you please call the roll?
Mead,
Mead here.
Evans, Slivka,
Slivka here.
Holloman,
Holloman here.
Madaskeel, Moran,
Moran here.
Stocking.
Stocking. All right. Next item is the approval of this evening's agenda.
Move to approve. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Next item is approval of the minutes of our November 9th, 2023 meeting.
Move to approve. Slivka. Second. Moran.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, and our item on this evening's agenda is 5A. It's a concept review, crossing at Geneva's townhome development. Conceptual review of a 40-unit townhome development. The proposed concept would require an amendment to the Fisher Farms planned PUD. The applicant is Lexington Homes, and the location is 2684 Stone Circle. Matt, we don't have anything, right? We just go right into it? All right. I think you guys were here previously, or at least like a year ago, I think it was.
So different.
Different group, so different, same site, but a different group, okay. All right, please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Scott Day, D-A-Y. I'm an attorney with the firm of Day and Robert out of Naperville, Illinois. I have the privilege this evening of representing both Lexington Homes as well as the property owner of this particular parcel. Oh, this moves. Fortunately for you, I have very, very little to say this evening. I will introduce the team and let Lexington Homes make a presentation to you. By way of background, there have been 4 different groups over the course of the last 4 years that have looked at purchasing this property. Everybody's been focused on townhomes for this particular site. Yeah. We've been through MI Homes, and we have been through, now Lexington is the 4th in line as it relates to this property. There were 2 others that were also through the village as it relates to this particular property. It has been vacant for going on, I think, 30 years since the original processing of your zoning for this particular parcel in 1996. Our team this evening, we have Nate Weinsma, from Vice President from Lexington Homes. He will make the presentation for their plan. He also has his engineer, Todd Schaefer, who is with the engineering firm of Hager Engineering in Schaumburg, Illinois. The record title owner is Covenant Construction Company. The principal is Terrence Van Summeren, and they are from Frontenac Road in Naperville, Illinois as well. At this time, I will introduce Nate Weinsma, and he will make the presentation for the concept.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having us, and I'm glad we're having this tonight before the storm hits. Can I advance the slides by the screen here? Or is it, Okay, so that's not like a touch screen. Okay. Great, great. I'm with Lexington Homes. I'll be very brief. We've been around a long time, a lot longer than the incorporation of our company would reflect. Lexington actually goes back to the 1970s, but that was really Lexington 1.0. We're reconstituted Lexington 2.0 that formed in 2006 with the same ownership core partnership structure that was in existence back then, or at least some of us were. In between, we had another company called Concord Homes that was very active in Chicago and the Chicago suburbs as well. And so we've been around a long time, built a lot of homes in the Chicago market. Came to this property more recently, and as Scott pointed out, we are one of a few that have tried and failed. I question how hard some of them tried, but we are a private company. We build between 75 and 125 homes a year, which I guess still makes us a big builder, but nowhere near the size of the real big builders. And those were the guys who previously kind of took a swing at this. And for them, it's maybe a little more work than they would want to undertake, and it's a little smaller than their average project. For us, we are drawn to areas that are infill in nature, where the communities are established, the amenities are established, and that kind of fits with more the model of what we typically build as a company. With that, I'll get into some of the specifics here. This is a view of the site, which kind of illustrates, interestingly, looks like the land is low, and in fact it kind of is. This would be the east side of the property, or I'm sorry, probably looking at the hospital, so it's looking east. That low area actually is consistent with what was previously planned to be these condominium buildings with the underground parking. They left the grade fairly low since they were going to have to excavate a lot of it anyway. This would be one of the areas where there'd be a curb cut with a ramp down into that lower level parking area, which is why it appears to be low. This is the concept plan, and there's a couple of reasons why we took this approach. The primary reason is that lots 1 and 5 contain the existing condominium buildings and totaling 90 units. And as you saw in the staff report, this was earmarked to be 250 and then modified to 220 units. So 90 were built. Everything outside of lot 1 and 5 consists of either the vacant lots 2, 3, and 4, which is what we are contracted to purchase, or lot 6. And if I can jump ahead here, this exhibit kind of shows you just highlighted lot 6. Lot 6 is the road, it's ingress, egress, both vehicular and pedestrian. It's where all the utilities, the primary utilities, whether water, sanitary, storm, or dry utilities like ComEd, phone, cable, all lie within lot 6 under a blanket easement, and that benefits the utility companies, but it also benefits lots 2, 3, and 4 and the city as well. So it's very clear in the documents that we reviewed that it's intended that the structures themselves sit within the lots, 1 through 5, 1 and 5 already being built. So we took an approach that we wanted to contain everything related to our buildings within lots 2, 3, and 4. And it's unclear whether any portions of the 2 existing buildings on lots 1 and 5 encroach on lot 6 at all. We haven't done that survey work to determine that yet, but there may be elements of those buildings that encroach. But we took the approach where we wanted to contain all the buildings within those pads 2, 3, and 4. And with that, that kind of brought us to a plan to build 4-unit buildings, which again kind of fits with our model in that end units provide for more light and ventilation, they provide for a higher premium. So we've got 50% interior units and 50% end units. We also took into consideration that there were 3 condominium buildings planned here with, I believe, 3 isolated curb cuts that would be shared driveways for those underground parking areas. So we want to limit curb cuts as much as possible. There is existing within lot 6, 41 guest parking spaces ringing that loop road. So obviously those were all built in the first phase along with those first 2 buildings. And we wanted to, where possible, respect those existing parking spaces, and where they were impacted by the new curb cuts, replace them with new parking. So we've got 41 existing dedicated guest parking spaces. Under this plan, we have 43. So we're able to replace them 1-to-1 with a little leeway for extra parking. The plan also then provides for us to extend sidewalks and driveways to service the residents, to connect to existing water, sanitary, and storm sewer. The water is typically on the outer ring of that road. The storm sewer and sanitary are primarily out at the property perimeter along the east and south and north property lines. So this plan essentially, from what we know of the utility layouts and the surveys today, avoids all those existing primary lines. So we connect to them for service, but we aren't impacting any of the utilities where anything has to be removed or replaced. So that was important also in the design. So essentially, when completed, those improvements for vehicular and pedestrian ingress and egress are what would exist within Lot 6, the connections of those utilities, and then the rest of Lot 6, we have I think the city shared with us the original landscape plans for Outlot 6 for the 3 buildings that were to be built originally. We would then have, essentially when it's done, visually nothing but landscaping within Lot 6. And that landscape plan would be developed to incorporate at a minimum what was intended to be there with those the original buildings, and probably more landscaping than what was originally proposed. But that's really what will end up being improved within Lot 6. We've provided some example elevations. These happen to be 5-unit building elevations. We haven't developed specific plans to these 4-unit buildings for this project yet. But the general configuration is 2-car garage, living space on the first level, which tends to be more flex space, either family room, home office. The second level is living, dining, kitchen, primarily, and then the third level would be bedroom And our typical layouts are 2 and 3 bedroom. We, we would incorporate some variation of material, different roof treatments around all 4 sides, whether it be gable ends, box bays. We tried to do a number of windows even on side and rear elevations. Every unit would have access to a deck on the rear. We've provided some idea of the general materials we typically would offer in a community like this. We also typically, and this is something we get different feedback from different municipalities on. We typically approach the development with at least 2 palette schemes for the materials of the buildings that are complementary but provide some variety. In this case, because we have existing buildings that we're going to be neighboring, we would further develop these elevations to have either 1 or 2 complementary color schemes to the materials of the building that would also be complementary to the existing. For instance, I don't think this color scheme necessarily blends well with the existing buildings, so we would develop something of a brick and siding and material colors that would be complementary to that. And we've provided all the conceptual layouts of the floor plans as well. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Did you want to touch on this piece then? As Scott said, our engineer is here. They also did the conceptual land plan, so whether it's a planning question, engineering, utility, Todd would be able to answer that. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have now or as a follow-up.
Yes, go ahead,
Yes.
Rebecca.
I was wondering if there were any kind of green materials or if that was being addressed or a priority for, as the builder.
Well, we have a whole litany of sustainable materials and the mechanics and designs that I can share with you. I didn't bring any of that tonight. Energy Star rating is one of the kind of the marketing brands that are out there that we tried to design to, and I can get you specifics on what those ratings would be. But typically we don't typically build like LEED rated buildings.
Okay.
But certainly high efficiency Energy Star ratings that are I think pretty unique to most builders in the market, I think. But I'd be happy to share the details of that with you.
Okay. I mean, I always ask a question about the energy efficiency and stuff like that. So I'm always, like solar power, like any kinds of considerations like that. I think.
Yeah, we didn't mean to interrupt. We
No.
have provided capability for a lot of that in designs, and again, I don't think we've probably developed anything that specific for this yet, but whether it be energy charging stations in our garages, at least provide for the stubs and utilities and capacity to add that. Same thing with solar panel. What we have found in our in a for sale townhome community atmosphere is I don't know that anybody has truly figured out yet how to provide for that on the front end. Since the association maintains all the exteriors, including the roofs and siding and all that, you know, we provide for it to be added later. I've yet to see associations really get together and say, this is what we're gonna do. Because it has a structural impact, it has a long-term maintenance impact. Everybody's gotta be on board because you can't have, you know, one person doing something that another isn't, or that the bylaws don't provide for. But we certainly wanna provide for that bandwidth and capability down the road.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Tim, go.
Thank you for the presentation. Matt was kind enough to also circulate with the materials tonight the minutes from a meeting back in 2020 where a sort of carryover development was proposed, and a lot of the issues that I had were addressed in that meeting, so I'm not going to cover any ground that's already been covered. But I guess my question is, and it was raised at the time, is the possibility of another access cut out to Fisher Drive on the north end. It would be south of Lot 4, north of Lot 5 there, and I don't know whether that question is more directed to staff or yourself. But given the fact that this would increase density, together with the fact that it now would result in two overlapping but nonetheless identifiable groups of homeowners who don't necessarily share the same driving patterns, that maybe having an additional access in and out would be a good thing.
Okay. Yeah, I think that maybe briefly came up in our staff discussion as well. It is a private drive that is contained within that Lot 6. You know, when it was initially developed and that intersection aligning Heartland Drive was built, it was intended that this be 220 units. With this plan, it would end up being a total of 130. And to be honest, we have not delved into or looked at what it would take to extend another drive at that northwest corner. I couldn't even, if I was guessing, you know, it certainly is going to involve the existing homeowners association. They'd have something to say about it. And I just don't know what kind of jurisdiction it would take to make that happen. We're certainly open to exploring that, and if it's determined that it's needed, it's necessary, and it can be implemented, we'd be amenable to building something like that.
Thank you.
John?
Piggybacking off of Commissioner Moran, and I don't know how much the staff shared with you what occurred in the December concept review with one of the previous three developers that were interested in this. But there was present at that meeting were some of the public, which is largely some folks representing the HOA for the existing property, and the theme of that was we purchased these units as age-restricted units. And I saw a definition of age-restricted up there a little bit ago. Maybe we might return to that. But we anticipated that this would always be age-restricted. Similar folks with similar driving habits, you know, they talk about walking circuitous around the complex in the middle of the road because there's not a lot of traffic and all that. Those are nice to haves. Now we're introducing a non-age restricted product to the circular drive, with folks running out to catch a train or to different commuting habits and everything else. And one of the things I wanted to ask, how much interaction have you had with the existing HOA? Because you're going to obviously have to talk to them at a minimum for a cost-sharing agreement.
Yep.
And then just so you can coexist and be good neighbors, and to consider things like, do we have a second drive? Do we make that a one-way circuitous so that everybody knows traffic's coming this way? And maybe it's two-way in front of the clubhouse. But just different things like that that would allow your product and your residents to coexist with folks that have been there now 20-plus years. It just to be kind of good neighborly and develop something that everybody can embrace. That would be, when you bring this forward and there's a public hearing, there's gonna be folks in the audience and we're gonna listen to what they have to say. And I would love to see this developed, but I wanna see it developed in a way that everybody feels good about it, including the existing 90 residents. So just things like that. And in Lot 6, you talk about landscaping going on Lot 6. Is that something then you maintain, or who owns Lot 6? And who
Yeah.
controls the maintenance of landscaping there? When the bush you plant dies, is it something that your secondary HOA pays for, or does it fall into the cost-sharing agreement? I've thrown a lot at you, but if you could just respond.
Yeah, no, I'll try to touch on all of them. We have not had any interaction with them yet.
Okay.
We have certainly read some history here, and I think that those interactions were enough to maybe scare one or two of these guys off to begin with. We know we need to engage them. I think the assumption we've taken to this point is we have to have a plan that does not invade Lot 6 in any way other than what is outlined in the
Right.
easement. We need to, we understand, and our assumption is we will have a cost-sharing agreement. We will have, some bylaw oversight from them related to our homeowners association and theirs. I don't know if they have two separate Lot 1 and Lot 5 building sub-associations to the master, but regardless, we want that agreement to encompass the development and the ultimate build-out and future residents. But I wanted to know, before we start those discussions in earnest, that we have a plan that can meet zoning requirements, setback all the standards, all the bulk, all the ordinance regulations, and not be coming to them with, an ask. We want to do something outside of, the parameters of these lots 2, 3, and 4. I think we've achieved that. Our assumption is that through the development, and I read some discussion about, the hours of construction and that construction shouldn't be allowed on this road. Well, I don't know how you build 3 condominium buildings without construction, versus townhomes, but we assume we will be under the same jurisdiction as any other development, regardless of private or public roads. We're under the jurisdiction of the city of Geneva with regards to our hours of operation and maintenance and keeping debris clear from the roads and sweeping the roads and things like that. Our initial estimation of the infrastructure that's there is that ring road is not in great shape. So we're assuming we will have to do some level of grinding and overlay of a new surface when our project is complete. We will assume up front that they will have oversight, or at least input. Ultimately, it will be a plan approved by the city, but input into our landscape plans. They're probably not going to be terribly concerned with the foundation plantings as opposed to the common area plantings, but we want them to put their stamp of approval on those plans. Anything we impact, whether it's turf or plant material, we'll include in that agreement with them that we will, our association and the developer, until we do that turnover, will guarantee all that plant material, so there's no question of, a tree that died and whose association's responsible for it. So it's it's complex, but I think we can boil it down to something fairly simple. And we do want to engage them. I think I'm not real concerned with working out those specifics. It's more, the overarching, just, we don't want to see anything developed here. That's untenable. I can't really respond to that, but the constructive criticism of a plan, whether it's the layout or the landscaping or anything like that, we're willing to work with them and come up with something that's agreeable to both the city and their association. And I think, certain things have been very clear to us that they do not want any new HOA or new residents to have use of or access to the clubhouse or their amenities, and that's nothing that's objectionable to us.
Had you given any thought to age restriction for your property? And I know that's hard with a 3-story townhome.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Who wants to do the stairs?
That's what I was gonna ask, is who is your target demographic for, because there's 2-bedroom and up to 4-bedroom
Yeah.
from what the report says, so
Yeah.
who's your target?
It's a pretty broad market. These are typically about 1,800 to, up to 2,200 plus square feet. They are all 2-car garage. There's a lot of living space, given that you have that flex space on the first floor. So, people in their 50s, 60s who, want a home office, want maintenance-free lifestyle. We're finding that we tend to sell to some younger demographic, but it is pretty broad, because with the capability of having 3 bedrooms with flex space on the first level in a 2-car garage, it could be a single parent with shared custody. But we also, I'm surprised by it, every project we do, that we will inevitably have a handful of buyers who, I would think, coming in the sales office door, they're too old to be our profile, and they want it. They tend to option up the interior quite a bit, and the stairs aren't a concern. They're active, and I guess, at some point in life, they maybe will reach a point where they feel they want to move on to something else, but we have a very broad demographic, and I could give you a little more detail behind that as we go through this process, but because we have kind of segmented percentages to a certain age group. The one thing that is very consistent is we always, when it comes to like student age population, we typically, there's a Rutgers study, there's a Naperville formula that we've utilized both, and consistently at sell out and build out, every community we've built has been well below the projected student or school age child population. And I think that's probably more a function of our price point. If you're, entry level today, I don't even know what that looks like anymore, but we don't build entry level, so these will be base priced in the mid 4s to low 5s. We sell our average option and upgrade is 7 to 10% of our base price. So when you get into those price points where you're 500 and up, those families with school-age children, even if the bedroom count and the room count and the garage and all that work for them, they're typically drawn to something at a lower price point. Like I said, we do see a number of single parents with, that may have some part-time custody. So they want a 3-bedroom home, but those bedrooms aren't necessarily always occupied. And it's really more the maintenance-free lifestyle that we see people drawn to, is they just don't want the snow removal, the lawn care, the exterior. And there is nothing, the term maintenance-free is a fallacy. I mean, there's no such thing. You're still gonna call your plumber when you have a drip and your furnace, has a problem, but it's as close to maintenance-free, I think, as you can get.
I live in a subdivision, a long par 5 from here. It's at Brisher and Peck. And it was a combination of 2 different property types, townhomes that were developed, and then the developer was a casualty of the 2008 downturn. And another developer came in and built 43 single-family homes. And I would just, from that, we've learned a lot, because you have 2 different product types, and you have kind of a built-in us versus them mentality. And I would just encourage you, as you engage with the existing residents, to listen to them, to try to work out something that will resolve, or at least come together and satisfy both parties on conflict, whether it's the amount of traffic, or do we have a second entrance, do we have speed bumps in order, and how are we gonna manage the parking? Some of these parking might not be any overnight parking, and that might be, you have to negotiate that kind of thing. So I would just, because they're gonna be at the next meeting, and we're gonna listen to them, and we'd all like to see vacant land developed in an appropriate way that's consistent with our master plan. So I just encourage you to avoid some of the things I've seen happen on other mixed developments, and you can save yourself some time and some money and some heartache, because these new folks have to live with the old folks. It's gonna be one community, and that's the desire. And there'll probably be, in ours, we have a shared area committee, and we have representatives from both HOAs, and we make decisions on common area plantings and parking restrictions and stuff like that. And it's, and it can work, but it's not without listening to each other, and because everybody comes from a slightly different perspective from the 2 property types, so.
Oh, and one of your questions was cost sharing.
Yep.
I don't know what the answer is to that. I don't think the answer is by unit count. They have 90, we have 40, so they should pay 2/3. I think it's gonna have to be a more balanced approach to the actual land area, especially common area, landscape maintenance, snow removal.
Right.
We're not 50% of the units, but we have as much impact to those areas as they probably do. So we'll come up with some formula that will reflect all that. We will have to have our own sub-association to enforce our bylaws. Our exterior maintenance, they're not gonna want anything to do with that.
Right.
They're probably not gonna want anything to do within a certain envelope of the building, so the foundation plantings and sidewalk stoops and things like that. We'll create that boundary of what is shared and come up with a formula.
When you have a dead bush, you'll hear about it from them, and when they have a dead bush, they'll hear about it from your guys. So
Right.
it's just-
Right. You wanna touch on a couple of things there?
Again, my name is Scott Day. I'm an attorney from Naperville, and I have the privilege of representing both the owners who have been through this now for the last 4 years, as well as Lexington Homes that is here for their first time. The age restriction is an interesting component. There is a perception, I think, at the condominium association that there must be some sort of a law that will compel age restriction at this particular product. I think that from my personal experience, that's a fallacy. I live in a townhome development that's less than a mile from downtown Naperville. We have 62 brick townhome units that were constructed roughly 22 years ago. And I will tell you, of the 62 units, I can't think of a single owner that's less than 55 years of age. and it's not an age-restricted development. It's simply a function of the product and the marketplace that you're dealing with. And of course, Geneva is one of those exceptional towns. I think that you will have a disproportionate number of senior people living in these particular units, at least as it's defined by the city. You have a relatively loose definition with a 55-year age assumption. But the zoning for this parcel was always contemplated with two different options. It was always contemplated that the initial would be a goal to have senior housing for this development, but then tied to that, there was a recognition that that might not work. And there was a recognition that there would have to be a secondary land use for this particular parcel, and the secondary land use was R7 zoning. That's the way that the city zoned it. So the condominium age restriction, how do I get to the reverse? Is it this one, Dave? This one. Okay, we've got way too many close controllers here for me. Oh, here we go. Thank you very much, Nate. The condominium age restriction is very interesting. It doesn't exist in your zoning ordinance. Your zoning ordinance didn't impose the age restriction. It was only imposed by the condominium structure when it was created. And the condominium structure is a very legalistic animal. It is the way to divide property contrary to subdivision law. It's something separate and distinct from subdivision law, and it allows you to create separate little tiny units of real estate that then can be conveyed. But in order to comply with the condominium laws, you have to comply with the Illinois Condominium Property Act. So it's absolutely a mandate, which means what you record at the beginning is binding on every property owner to the subdivision. So when this one was originally created, they created this age restriction, and it essentially said that as long as one of the initial occupants of a condominium is 55 years or older, the remaining occupants must only be 19 years of age or older. And up to 20% of the condominium units need not have any resident exceeding 55 years of age, provided that at some prior date, a 55-year-old occupant did occupy the property. So the only real hard restriction is that if you're less than 19 years of age, you can only live there for 3 months and then you're out. Above that, you can legally have a host of authorities. Now, this age restriction, again, it was not imposed by the city. This was created by the developer of the condominium. And in developing the condominium, they did not apply this to lots 2, 3, and 4. So the restrictions that were recorded when everybody bought one of their condominium units, it expressly said that this restriction is not part of what is applied to units 2, 3, and 4, and it specifically told anybody that was buying into the development that there could be a different use on lots 2, 3, and 4. It's right within the covenants and restrictions. Next, lots 2, 3, and 4, currently, they can't be added to the condominium. Now, the reason I say that is that the original declaration of condominium, developers do what is called add-on condominium structuring, and that allows you to develop a condominium with multiple different phases, and they will record the initial phase at the inception of the development, which they did for this, and it enveloped the initial building and enveloped that secondary building as well. Those buildings were subject to these covenants. But the covenants also said that the developer can, if they want to, add lots 2, 3, and 4 at some future date. But they can only do that for up to 10 years.
Right.
So that particular right to convert these lots to a condominium, that expired roughly a decade ago.
Question for you. It says at the end there that even if the city wanted lots 2, 3, and 4 to become part of the same condominium
Correct.
project, the city or such a development would violate the private covenants that now prohibit such an addition. Are you saying that if the parties all wanted, if the ownership parties wanted to do that, they couldn't do it? They could do that, right?
And here's what that brings into play. To amend declarations for a condominium, it requires a supermajority vote of every single resident. So
Right.
you would have to get a high percentage of the 90 people within the development itself in order
Understood.
to agree to that. And if you couldn't achieve the appropriate percentage, and I don't know if this one is 75% or if it's
Right.
60%, I don't know
Understood.
what the number is. But it would require that consent, and that also relates to the common element. In other words, the private roadway, by the way this property was subdivided, the private roadway is a common element of the subdivision, but it is also a subdivision easement right that is owned by lots 2, 3, and 4, regardless of what they're used for.
Okay.
So modification of a common element requires that supermajority vote. So if you've got 50% of the condominium owners that would like a secondary entryway in here, and the village engineers thought that that would be a good idea for a safety standpoint, I think the fire protection vehicles and
Right,
emergency
right,
vehicles, they
sure.
did suggest that. It would still require a supermajority vote of the condominium association to agree to that modification of the element, as well as the owners of lot 2, 3, and 4, even though they're not part of the condominium. So it's one of those ludicrously legalistic complications that's associated with a development of this nature.
So should we see you come forth with an application, and your application includes a secondary entrance, we can assume you've probably had some meaningful discussions with the existing HOA to take the temperature of whether they're able to achieve a supermajority vote to add that.
Yeah, my client would not come before the city without an agreement
Okay.
in writing
Awesome.
from the association that
Okay.
said they've got a supermajority vote to
Okay.
agree to a second
Right.
entryway into the project.
Best use of everybody's time.
Exactly.
Right.
So, we brought this issue of the roadway up to the city, and we said we're perfectly happy processing an amendment to this planned unit development here and give authorization or conditions of the amendment to the city to control what they wanted to do with the roadway. And it was strongly suggested that because this is a private road, this should be negotiated exclusively between the private property owners, and the city should not be a participant to that. So there's different ways to deal with that. It's much easier for us if the city regulates the relationship between these parties, because the city, we are confident that the city is used to dealing with very reasonable and rational and fair division of responsibilities on these roads. I think this is a private property right, and as such, I think that we don't have to have an agreement with them in order to access the access rights, but Lexington has made clear they intend to sit down with the association and try to negotiate a fair access right. If they can do so, they will. If they can't negotiate a fair ingress-egress right, they will still request the zoning and simply say, to this point in time, we've been unable to resolve the differences between the parties. But they will try to go ahead and do that. They don't want difficulties of dealing with this association to defeat the project, as it has in the past. They don't want that to happen. So they are here. I can tell you that the property owners are going to ask the city to implement what is called the secondary zoning. You can see that the secondary zoning was really created by this 96 Ordinance 27, and this ordinance was an outgrowth of the annexation agreement. This annexation was part of a huge undertaking called Fisher Farms, and it involved hundreds and hundreds of acres and many, many different parcels. I think there were 9 or 10 different parcels that made up this development. And then a couple years after the annexation agreement was put together, they put together the zoning for this Area 9, and that's this ordinance number 9727. And within this particular ordinance, it took all of neighborhood number 9 into consideration. And then for purposes of lots 2 and 3, they had both primary and secondary uses. Neighborhood 9, and this is quoting from section 3 of that 1996 ordinance, says neighborhood 9 is approved for primary use for senior apartments and senior housing with up to 250 senior dwelling units, with accessory and ancillary support facilities constructed and operated thereon. Neighborhood 9 primary use. For purposes of this ordinance, senior housing shall include residential facilities, i.e. apartments, condominiums, townhomes, etc. So any of these uses, the actual buildings, the structures themselves are very consistent with the way that even the primary use was zoned. And designed and operated for persons or with a spouse, one of whom is age 55 years or older. That's the only provision anywhere in your zoning documents that addresses this. If you look at the ordinance that approved this subdivision, it doesn't speak to this 55-year age restriction. That appears only in the private covenants associated with the association itself. So the secondary use in this case, in the event of a conversion of neighborhood 9 to the secondary uses identified under alternate 2, there's this procedure that they can go through with the city, but the secondary use may only be effectuated in the event that the neighborhood 9 primary use is not implemented within 8 years following the date of this ordinance, which would be 2004. I have no idea what the term implemented means. it's not really clear. We're dealing with a situation, and I think David's report says,
Right.
is it an all or nothing? We don't know. It simply says implemented.
Right.
But the next stage of the ordinance says, in the event either or both of 9 or Area E are not conveyed to a purchaser for value or developed of their primary use, initiated prior to the second anniversary date of this ordinance, the owner of such developed area may at any time thereafter petition the city to rezone such development area owned by it for the secondary use. So in this case, they're tying the triggering event to requesting the secondary use to the fact that it hasn't been redeveloped. It's either implemented or developed. In this case, it was not developed. So these parcels have been sitting there for the better part, almost 30 years now, undeveloped. And the owner of the property, which I also represent, is going to ask the city to implement the secondary use for this parcel. We want to get over the hurdle where there's this discussion as to whether or not the secondary use should be implemented. We want the city to make the determination. There are several factors that we want you to take into consideration in that regard. Now, in terms of where we leave this this evening with the city, the owner would like to request the secondary land use, which would put it in the R7, but it would still require a modification of the planned unit development, which means you still have to go through the conditional use proceedings with the city. The city has the opportunity to address conditions to it and attach conditions to it. Resolution of how we're going to deal with the private road ingress and egress will certainly be an element associated with that. The situation and positioning of the buildings will be one of them. But the apartment buildings themselves, in terms of condos, townhomes, apartments, all of those factors, I think they're already in the approved zoning. I don't think that whether or not this is converted to townhomes is an issue before the city. It's a question of the age of the people that go into the buildings themselves, because the buildings themselves are part of even the primary use. Townhomes were approved as part of the primary use itself. So the age restriction itself is an interesting element because 3-story townhomes are not particularly compatible with people approaching their golden years, let's put it that way. And 55 is relatively young by today's standards for purposes of age restrictions. But I can tell you, even within our neighborhood, the primary master bedrooms are on the first floor. It's one of the elements that was constructed into these 20-some years ago. Townhomes themselves with 3-story units are not particularly compatible with that. So those are some of the legal issues that are associated with this. We recognize that from certainly a political standpoint as well as land planning standpoint, the age restriction is something that should be addressed. We think that there is a legal pathway forward that the property owner can take. In that regard, we don't want that to defeat the project. So the property owner will be requesting the age restriction modification to the secondary use at this particular location while still trying to work with the neighbors to find a pathway forward to deal with the common elements. Do you have any questions of me about the legal elements on this?
Yes, Tim.
Not really a question, just an observation, and again, piggybacking on Commissioner Mead's comments from earlier. I think it's important to keep in mind that when this ordinance was drafted, some of the primary proponents of it were people like Sam Hill and Ron Singer and Paul Dakota, whose picture is on the wall behind you, all of whom have left us. But they did what they felt was important to create at least the opportunity to start a discussion about the need for senior housing in this town. I'm not sure that the ordinance isn't unambiguous. I have trouble reading it, 35 years of legal experience here, and I'm not sure what it says. But I think to Commissioner Mead's point, that the more you can get agreement with the current homeowner association, the easier it will be to swallow the pill of changing the PUD as requested. And I like the way it looks. I think something needs to be built here. But I think we need to honor, at least in spirit, the idea that this fulfilled the idea of senior housing.
We understand that that is the perception of the existing condominium owners. And I talked with your staff about the extent to which the city has developed senior housing in the community. And with the exception of healthcare facilities, assisted living care facilities, senior-related care facilities, at the point in time that we had the discussion, David was not able to point to any other developments that have been brought in under that particular umbrella. The marketplace for age-restricted is, there's a robust marketplace for health-related care facilities.
And I don't mean to interrupt, I'm not suggesting that you convert your proposal into senior
Understood.
housing or adopt a similar language. All I'm saying is that when you have conversations with the current association, that issue is going to be up, and the more those you can resolve, the better.
I think that's wise counsel. I agree.
Rebecca, did you have something further?
Did, but I don't know who would best answer it. Well, a comment and a question. To your point about first floor masters,
Yes.
was that ever a consideration in any of the floor plans, or? I
I'm going
don't
to let the builders
think
address
I've
that.
seen, okay, yeah, and then my second, just a comment, I was gonna say, with the north entrance and egress, there is a school, I'm sure that, you know, like Heartland, so that intersection in the morning is really a lot for parents driving in and out and residents who would be leaving that drive. So I guess I was also kind of wondering, and this is a question for staff, has there ever been any talk about with that land being developed, like either a light or a stop sign, or, I mean, anything like that? Because I would assume in the morning, it's very, with all the buses coming in and out, and it's gonna be a busy place.
I can answer from our standpoint.
Okay.
The public roads are your jurisdiction. The city controls what you consider to be in the best interest of the public health, welfare, and safety in terms of your roads. And we follow your regulations, whether we like them or not, because that's your jurisdiction and it's totally in your wheelhouse. As it relates to a private road, the law's extremely liberal. Once you have a private road that is created within a subdivision like this, everybody gets to use it, and if you don't have an agreement on cost sharing, then you fix it when you need it. I mean, it's ludicrously primitive in terms of what the law is, which means it behooves both the association as well as the developer of lots 2, 3, and 4 to work out a mutually amicable cost-sharing agreement for that. I will tell you, the sole reason I'm involved in this particular project is that I was brought in by the attorneys who had worked for the other 3 developers on this project, and they've said, we've got to figure out a way to deal with this road, and we got to dig down deep in terms of what the law is in this regard. So it's something that has to be done. We're prepared to go ahead and do that. I have had some communication with their attorney that was not all that satisfactory, but I will tell you that the developer on this project in Lexington is fully committed to negotiating a mutually reasonable cost-sharing arrangement, both for the landscaping that's in the common element area as well as for the roadway itself.
So are there any restrictions to a cut?
There haven't been any discussions, to my knowledge, about adding stop
north
signs or
side.
stoplights along that stretch. I do think in our discussions with our development staff, there were some challenges to adding in access in the north end with the topography.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And we'd have to revisit that to see
Yeah,
if
I
it's
know where-
workable or not.
Yeah, I mean, there is some sightline issues. You've
Right.
got Williamsburg just to the north, and that's a pretty, I think the design of this subdivision is that Fisher Road has no stops between Brisher and Kesslinger.
Right.
So everything else stops and it's limited access. This may be the topography, maybe if you added an access to the north, it might be right in, right out only, who knows? But
It might work.
It might.
Right in, right out might work.
Yeah, I can see that. So to the question about the first floor masters, is that ever been a consideration?
It's always a consideration. We just completed a community in Glenview that was all first floor master detached homes, but it was not age restricted. And there is a deep market for that. The limitations here are geometry, one being the footprint of these 3 lots that we have to be contained within. Limit that. I did see a version of a different type of townhome product laid out that I think 2 of the units had a first floor primary bedroom. But again, the geometry of the site's very restrictive. There is a deep market for that, and one of the other elements to that product is it is expensive to build because your foundation grows with the addition of that bedroom suite footprint on the first floor. So the fixed costs of like a foundation and a roof structure, which are 2 of your most expensive components, goes way up, which means that it's a more expensive product to sell. And when you get to a certain price point for that demographic of buyer, this particular location and the surrounding uses in the shadow of condominiums and shared common area with them, we don't think really fits that market dynamic and that demographic, at least from what we've experienced in the marketplace. But I would love to find that piece that can just be all first floor primary suites, because there is a deep market for that. And everywhere we go, we hear the same thing from people. We need something like that in our community. And then you go to somewhere like Glenview, where we had the luxury to do it, and those homes averaged 1.5 million. So it's like, we want to be able to produce a product like that in a price point that's more in line with the middle of the market. So it's difficult, though. It is. It's a challenge.
Yes, John.
Speaking of affordability, we have a stated and real desire in this city to address housing affordability. And it's a lot easier to do in rental product. But if you gave some thought and you could somehow figure out how to incorporate some level of affordability into this project, it would be well received, I believe. I don't have an answer for you. It's for sale product. Maybe that's not the case, but we'll be asking about that when you come forward.
Okay. Yeah. That's another one that's like a hot button for
Right.
a lot of communities. I was just in a meeting in Chicago this morning for a development we have with 100 townhomes in Bridgeport. The city has a need for tens of thousands of affordable units. And, it's difficult, one project at a time, to make any kind of ripple effect with something so small. But fortunately, there's been state legislation now on affordable tax credits that makes the rental side of it, the long-term investment ownership with those tax credits, a lot more, I wouldn't say lucrative, but it makes those projects much more feasible. On the for sale side, I think there needs to be something like that.
Right.
That can make it sustainable and more long-term, because it's the cost of ownership that really drives part of that challenge, is long-term, especially in a community like this where your affordability is a price point, but then it's your utility bills, it's your assessments, it's your long-term maintenance.
Right.
And what we've seen, kind of the unintended consequences in places like Chicago, is those qualified affordable units that are restricted then on their appreciation and who they can sell their home to when that time comes. There's a disincentive for those people to put sweat equity into their homes. Because it doesn't matter if I put a new kitchen in, I can't get more money for my unit because I'm deed restricted, a restrictive covenant. So it's a challenge.
Right. Understood.
We face it all the time and try to do our best. If there's not any more questions, we'd just like to thank you for inviting us tonight.
David?
Did you want to
Yeah.
touch on?
If I could, we outlined a few questions that we thought were relevant in the staff report, and I think one that we maybe didn't touch on was the orientation of the buildings. These are rear-loaded units, and as it's laid out in the concept plan, none of the front doors are really oriented towards Stone Circle or towards the street. And we were just looking for any feedback from the commission on that. Obviously, if you did rotate them and orient them towards the street, you would probably wind up losing some units. And I think you spoke to the 4-unit count being desirable for the end units. We do allow up to 6 units to be attached without having to require sprinklers. So that might help limit the number of units that would be lost if you were to orient some of them towards the street. Just looking at like the bottom of lot 2 and the top of lot 3, those front doors kind of really facing, the hospital campus, just struck us as a little awkward.
Yeah, and did everybody get the sketch? Okay.
No,
Yeah.
I don't think we distributed that, that was just more. Oh, no, we have it.
Oh,
I can pull it up.
Yeah, I've got it.
yeah, I mean, just saw this tonight. We'll take a hard look at this. I think that, sure. Having, more of a row home, the architecture streetscape is nice. In a typical, front-load townhome, the challenge is then you've just got a lot of curb cuts, a lot of cars in the driveways, a lot of garage doors that you're staring at. So you don't really get a lot of architecture anyway. So in a product like this, where there are no garages in the front, there's advantages to having it face the street. But there are some, I can see in the sketch, there's some disadvantages, and we'd have to
That's not working.
kind of study it and look at both. There you go.
All right, drag it to the right for future reference.
And then we've looked at configurations like this for properties similar. Some of the things you lose are that, dedicated green space along the perimeter, because now you got pavement kind of paralleling the property line. This plan, I think, we'll ask Hager to study it.
Can I speak? Sorry, I just did that very loosely on Adobe.
Yeah.
So it's not super, particular. The dark green is the roads. It would just be the same width as like the drive aisles that you
Right.
guys had before.
Yep.
So that's just a loose.
Still contained within the lots, was the adjustment.
What was that?
It was still contained within the lots.
Yes.
So, the challenges are the utilities, the sanitary sewer, storm sewer, what impacts there might be around that, what is now kind of an open lawn perimeter. The problems that we've come, to in the past, and, I can see some of the same challenges here is, this is the driveway, this is a curb cut, which is fine, to serve this building. But what ends up happening is you have pavement on the front, pavement on the back, pavement on the side, that you get these units and buildings that end up having asphalt front door, asphalt back door. In some cases, it's all 4 sides or 3 sides. And that becomes very challenging for any kind of green space, like the turning it perpendicular, all the front doors then face green spaces. Either shared courts or the open space that would be created between Lot 1 and the first building, or Fisher, the one at the northwest corner. I don't know if I can get back to,
Yeah, if you just hit the power.
hit the PowerPoint button. There you go. Oh, maybe not. Oh, this one, sorry.
Shit.
We have to write that one again, too?
Oh, are we?
It's on mine. Do I have to hit share?
Yeah, if you hit presentation or slideshow. Hit slideshow, David.
I think there's a
It's
secret
weird, it's
second
on
screen,
screen.
second screen that we have to drag it onto.
Okay,
I think
there you
that's
go.
what it is.
Yeah.
So we'll study that a little further. This configuration is, there is, I think if we kind of do a comparison, we'll see that there's a lot more impervious pavement area in the alternate plan. Because you kind of lose some of that efficiency of one drive serving 8 units instead of one drive coming around and serving one building behind it without anything, with green space behind that. So there's some duplication of pavement. We like to, you can't see it very well on here, but like between buildings 6 and 7 here, this courtyard, that becomes a heavily landscaped. Certainly doesn't have the scale of what they have on Lot 6, but that's kind of the idea, is this shared private courtyard that all the front doors face. In some of these, like you said, this building at the very southeast corner, we'd want to have this all heavily landscaped to give them that same kind of private courtyard feel, even though they don't share that face-to-face orientation that some of these others do that have courtyards between them. But it's still a nice feel and a nice architectural appearance to Fisher, and it will be for this Lot 1, this building. We've got a lot of room here to add plenty of landscaping and trees and shrubs and things, maybe even a berm if we can fit it. So it's 6 in one, half a dozen the other. There's, I think, benefits to both. And we'll study that a little further and give you some of our feedback on that concept and what we think are the.
Maybe you can accomplish it for some of the buildings and not all of them, and
Yeah.
soften that issue, I guess. That's a
Yeah.
good point, though.
Michael?
Yeah, or maybe I would say, would you consider multiple size buildings? So it would allow you to arrange them differently on the site.
Yeah, and that's maybe how you get a combination of both is, maybe there are 6 units and maybe there's 3 units, and we'll look at that.
Yeah, I mean, because I agree, the challenge is a wall of garage doors and
Yeah.
seeing nothing but that. But also to somehow have the entrances, more facing the street, at least maybe in some occasions.
Yeah.
Facing your neighbors, the existing folks.
Yeah.
Probably like to see some front doors.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta remember, we can't cross, because lot 6 is between lots 2, 3, and 4.
Yes.
So we can't cross those with
Yeah,
buildings.
yeah, that's the hypersensitivity, is that, maintaining that Lot 6, so within that constraint.
Right.
We'll look
Yeah.
at it and see what we
Yeah,
can
further constraints.
come up with.
It's tight.
It's tight, yeah, when you think about a center corridor condominium building that's, your living, dining, kitchen with a bedroom, bath, and it's a 2-bedroom unit, it's not that deep. So the front to front and that center corridor isn't terribly deep. It's not a terribly deep footprint to then start putting townhome buildings in,
Yeah.
so.
But it'd be nice if you got some street.
Yeah.
you know, facing the street on the doors would be nice.
Yeah.
In some instances.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Very
Anything
good.
else, guys?
Appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
your time.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Yep, you too. Okay, and then I have item 6 is public comment. There's no one here present in City Hall, so nobody asked. So it's just people online who, if there's anyone online? There is no one, there's no one online, so we don't even do the online anymore?
Correct. No.
My goodness.
You can still watch it.
You can still watch it, but you can't yell at us. Okay, all right. What else we got, Matt?
Yeah, so just a couple things I wanted to just put on everyone's radar. So we got the January 25 meeting scheduled. That's going to be for the Bullock campus. Just prepare for that one. I'm going to try to get out the reports as quickly as I can to you guys, just so we have ample time to look at that one. It's a larger site, so we'll try to make sure.
The amount of materials that's on the development website,
Yes.
you're gonna put together the stuff I've looked at it, but I haven't, I'm not gonna print everything
Yeah,
out.
so-
You're
yeah,
gonna
so
put
we'll-
together what we need to make a decision.
Yeah, the applicant will provide us with some physical copies. We'll compile all that with the reports as we normally do and get that all for you. If you want to look online, the documents further submittal are on there right now if you want to
And
start
there's,
looking at
there's
it.
various stages of those. Would you say just to focus on the most recent, the January of 2024?
Yeah, so I just updated it. The very last one is going to be the Planning and Zoning Commission submittal. So those will be the most recent documents on there.
Will you try to get that out before the Monday of?
Yeah, I mean, that's the plan. I'm hoping to, yeah.
Okay.
We'll see if we can achieve that.
All right.
Other than that, I mean, it's looking like we're gonna have a pretty busy beginning of the year here. We got a couple big projects that just resubmitted. We got a couple kind of bigger projects that are getting ready to come before you guys. So I would expect probably fairly consistent meetings, at least for the next couple months. But I'll keep you
Good.
updated once we kind of get more info. Yeah, and that's really all I have, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Very good. Who's gonna make the motion?
Motion to move to adjourn.
Okay, thank you, John.
No, ma'am.